You're banned from Christmas, idiot. That's what my mother said the night I told my family I was pregnant. My name is Nora Bennett. I'm 29, and that evening was meant to be special. Our big family dinner, the one Mom labeled a celebration of blessings. She'd send out emails, reminders, even color-coded spreadsheets assigning side dishes. Each of us had been given a prompt. One achievement, one thing we were thankful for. I arrived in the beige cardigan she said made me look presentable. I curled my hair, even though it never stays that way. The house smelled of pine-scented candles and pot roast. Everything was arranged just right, like a scene from a Hallmark movie if Hallmark made films about my life. Somewhere between the mashed potatoes and the green beans, I chose honesty. I said I was pregnant. I imagined Mom might stiffen then soften. Maybe she'd offer something gentle. Or at least something awkward but hopeful. Instead, her expression hardened, like she'd been bracing for this forever. Like this was the moment I confirmed every fear she'd carried about her imperfect firstborn. The silence that followed could have cut through crusty bread. My sister Daisy studied her plate. Dad cleared his throat as if he could disappear inside the sound. Uncle Rich grabbed another roll, because heaven forbid he skip carbs, even during a family crisis. Then Mom delivered it, crisp and icy. You're banned from Christmas, idiot. No raised voice.
No tears.
She said it the way you cross off a task. And I was the task. At first I laughed. That strange, shaky laugh that slips out when your body hasn't figured out how to process pain yet. But she didn't laugh. No one did. Daisy almost looked relieved, like she'd dodged a bullet. It wasn't just the sentence, it was the way she reduced me with it. Like I was a stain she'd hidden behind glitter and garland for years. The same woman who taught me to bake sugar cookies had just decided I didn't deserve Christmas. Or sugar. Or anything sweet at all. I stared at my plate. The green beans were cooling in pools of butter. The gravy thickened into paste. I thought about all the times I'd set that table, wrapped those gifts, helped frost her famous peppermint cake. And sitting there under the too bright chandelier, I understood something. I had just been uninvited from my own family. She told everyone to keep eating, and they obeyed. I tried to swallow a bite, but it felt like chewing sand. Dad mumbled something about timing and family values. Mom gave a tight nod. Daisy finally spoke. Maybe you should have told us privately. I wanted to reply that maybe Mom shouldn't bulldoze her daughter in public. But I didn't. I just felt my heart shrink smaller and smaller, like it could tuck itself inside a napkin ring. I hadn't expected applause.
No balloons, no confetti. Just not this.
Maybe a stunned pause. Some uneasy congratulations. A whispered, we'll figure it out. Instead, I got an eviction notice from the holidays. That night, I packed a small bag. I didn't even grab my coat from the hallway. I stepped outside. Snow drifted down, clinging to my sweater, melting against my cheeks. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd run after me, like in those cheesy Christmas movies. When I glanced back, the door was closed. The wreath glowed. Perfect, artificial. I drove home, without speaking. The radio played carols. Silent Night, of course, because the universe has a dark sense of humor. Every lyric felt sarcastic. I shut it off and whispered to my belly, don't worry. I'll give you Christmas. Maybe not this one, but someday. It's strange how quickly a home can turn into someone else's house. How a single sentence can rewrite what family means. I thought I'd cry all night. I didn't. I sat there numb, thinking about the rules Mom built our lives on. How appearances outranked truth. How every dinner felt like a stage. Every smile rehearsed. But at night, the phrase echoed. She's just like her.
Who was she?
A secret? A shadow? The question stayed with me, along with a fragile, impossible hope that maybe I'd never been the problem at all. Then one rainy Tuesday, hope appeared quietly, glowing blue from my laptop screen. A message from Elena, a former coworker, bold, warm, fearless. She'd moved back to Dublin to manage a small riverside hotel. They needed someone for night shifts. If you need a fresh start, she wrote, come. We'll find you a corner of the world where no one knows your story yet. No one knows your story yet. It sounded like a promise and a warning. I was 7 months pregnant, broke, terrified. But a voice deep inside whispered, what if leaving isn't weakness? What if it's survival? That night, I opened my grandmother's recipe box. Between worn cards for cherry pudding and Thanksgiving pie, I found a note in her slanted handwriting. If life tells you there's no seat for you at the table, build your own. Invite kindness. Leave one chair empty. Someone will fill it. Below it, faint but legible, not all Christmas gifts come wrapped. I read it over and over until something shifted inside me. Then another slip of paper fell free, my mother's handwriting. You were right, Mom. It's done. I'll be the good girl they expect. I won't speak of it again. A secret pressed between sugar stains. That night, I rested my hands on my belly and whispered, we'll find a home. It might not be perfect, but it'll be ours. The baby kicked, firm, certain like agreement. The next morning, I called Elena. Her voice felt like sunlight. Come to Dublin, she said. It's chilly, but the tea's hot. And people here believe in second chances. A week later, I sold my car, packed 2 suitcases and the recipe box, and left quietly. As the plane rose above fields blanketed in snow, I murmured, goodbye, old Christmas. For the first time in years, I didn't feel diminished. I felt untethered. For days, I kept replaying her message. Not because I missed her, though maybe a small part of me did, but because I was trying to read what she hadn't written. She hadn't said she was proud. She hadn't apologized. Just happy. As if my success surprised her, as if I'd accomplished it without her blueprint. Then Daisy texted, Mom watches your videos all the time. She's proud, even if she'll never admit it. Maybe it's time you two talked. She added, everyone at church saw your interview. They won't stop talking about you. I laughed and cried at once. The same people who once treated my name like a scandal now spoke it like a holiday miracle. But I wasn't ready. Elena's words came back to me. You don't have to forgive to move forward. But you do have to ask yourself if you're leaving from peace or from fear. That decided it. When my publisher offered a small US book tour, I said yes. I wanted Clara to see where I'd started. And I wanted to stand there as the woman I'd become, not the girl who had been exiled. The signing would be at my hometown library, the same place where I used to disappear between shelves, reading cookbooks like they were blueprints for escape. I packed simply. 2 dresses, Clara's favorite blanket, a small jar of Irish soil, and the recipe box that had changed everything. The night before we left, I baked 1 more cinnamon star bread. The apartment filled with warmth and spice, while Clara toddled around gripping her toy spoon. I knelt beside her. Tomorrow we go back to where it began, sweetheart. And this time, we're not visitors. We belong. Flying in felt unreal. The streets looked untouched, neat houses draped in Christmas lights. But I wasn't the same girl who once walked them carrying shame. At the bookstore, Mrs. Callahan, who'd known me since I was awkward and 15, wrapped me in a hug. We're proud of you, Nora, she said. Her kindness nearly unraveled me. Inside, the shop glowed with string lights and cinnamon candles. Stacks of band from Christmas and other blessings covered the tables. People smiled, waited patiently for signatures, leaned close to say, you helped me. The same eyes that once slid past me now held gratitude. Halfway through my reading, I saw her. My mother stood at the back, pale and motionless, clutching her purse like armor. The breath left my body. I kept reading. I had to. But when I reached the passage about grace, my voice softened. Forgiveness isn't a reward for someone who's earned it, I read. It's a decision you make when you refuse to let bitterness dictate your life. When I finished, the silence lingered for a heartbeat. Then applause rose, gentle at first, then swelling. Afterward, as the crowd thinned, she remained near the exit, uncertain whether to step forward or retreat. I walked toward her. Every step carried years of unsaid words. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Fragile. The certainty she once wore had thinned into something like fear. Her mouth opened, trembled. You look just like her, she whispered. You look just like her. And in that narrow space between her words and my next breath, I understood. She meant the baby she'd lost. The one buried in silence. The shadow that had shaped every rigid rule, every demand for perfection. She pulled an envelope from her purse. My hands shook. Some truths crash in like storms. Others arrive folded in paper. Inside were photographs I had never seen. My mother as a teenager, bright-eyed beside a hospital bed. My grandmother, holding a child who was a me. On the back, in faded ink softened by years of almost confession, for forgiveness, when it's time. I didn't know whether to embrace her or fall apart. Then she said the sentence that dismantled everything I thought I understood. She'd wanted me flawless because she'd never been allowed to be human. Control had masqueraded as love. Silence had felt like protection. Her apology wasn't polished. It broke out of her in a raw, shaking sob. Regret finally learning how to speak. For a moment, I didn't see the woman who had banished me. I saw a frightened daughter who'd carried shame so long she mistook cruelty for strength. I touched her arm. "You can let it go," I said softly. "You don't have to carry it anymore." The bookstore grew still, not with gossip, but with something like reverence. She withdrew a second envelope and handed it to the manager, asking that it be delivered to the local paper along with a statement. She had lied about her daughter. She had lied about herself. And she was ready for the full truth to stand in daylight. It wasn't spectacle. It wasn't revenge. It was honesty, bare beneath fluorescent lights, refusing to flinch. That evening, we sat in a small cafe where cups chimed softly and steam haloed the sugar packets. She told me everything secrecy had stolen. The teenage pregnancy, the pressure, the arrangement that erased one life and rewrote another. With each sentence, a brick seemed to lift from her chest. We were both lighter and exposed. I didn't forgive her in a dramatic rush. Forgiveness isn't thunder. It's thaw. But I let her sit across from me without hatred. And that was the start. When we parted, she said, "I'd like to meet Clara someday." "Maybe at Christmas," I replied. And for the first time, the word didn't taste like exile. It felt like possibility. Back at the hotel, my phone flooded with notifications. Someone had filmed the moment she handed over the photographs. The clip of us speaking through tears carried the caption, "A mother's truth, a daughter's grace." I lay on the bed exhausted and strangely calm. The circle wasn't closing in vengeance. It was closing in light. If I ever sat at that family table again, I wouldn't be the broken girl who walked out. I would be the woman who returned, seen and unafraid. Power, I learned, doesn't roar. It settles quietly when you catch your reflection and recognize the woman staring back. After that night, something inside me finally exhaled. The part of me that begged for my mother's approval loosened its grip. I realized I didn't need the words, "I'm proud of you," or even "I love you," spoken the old, careful way. I only needed her to see that I was okay. Not in spite of her, but beyond her. The story spread. Podcasts, newspapers, strangers passing it along. People called it the moment a daughter forgave her mother on camera. But I hadn't staged forgiveness. I'd simply run out of room for resentment. Maybe that's what grace looks like when it's tired and still chooses tenderness. Back in Dublin, second sunrise spilled over itself beneath a chalkboard that read, "Some doors close." Fake windows. We hired women who needed both wages and witnesses, single mothers, late bloomers, grandmothers who could braid dough blindfolded. The kitchen filled with laughter, flour, and the beautiful chaos that feels like family. When the book landed on a bestseller list, my publisher cried. "They're not buying recipes," she said. "They're buying hope." I believed her. Every box we tied with twine felt like a quiet amen. Then New York called. A Christmas Eve telecast for single parents. They wanted both of us. I laughed first. Then I flinched. Sitting beside my mother under studio lights felt like walking across emotional wire. Elena tilted her head. "Think about the women who haven't found their voices yet." That was enough. Mom, and I began the slow rhythm of careful messages. Photos of my childhood ornaments, polished and waiting. Questions about Clara's favorite songs. News that my father read my book and wept quietly in the evenings, like a letter delivered decades late. I prepared my remarks not as accusation, but as guidance. About the difference between inviting someone back into your life and allowing them peace inside your heart. Clara, bright and chatty, declared, "My mama bakes stars." If she grew up knowing even half the hard-won quiet I'd fought for, it would be enough. On the flight, I watched the ocean darken beneath us and felt not nerves, but steadiness, the calm that comes after losing everything once and discovering you can rebuild. When we landed, a message waited from my mother. "See you soon, my brave girl." For the first time, the word "my" didn't feel like possession. It felt like gentle acknowledgement. I no longer belonged to her narrative. I belonged to my own. Christmas Eve shimmered and hummed. The studio glowed with music and fairy lights. Before we stepped on stage, I pinned her brooch because her hands were trembling, the same way they once tied my shoelaces before kindergarten. In that quiet reversal, I understood that healing is often written in small, ordinary gestures that look insignificant and mean everything. She looked at me, eyes shining. "Thank you for coming home," she whispered. "I never truly left," I said. "I just had to find my way back." Then the stage manager called our names. The children's choir faded into applause. And time seemed to hold its breath. Time seemed to fold inward until all I could hear was my own heart choosing light again. The host asked about second sunrise, and I gave the answer I'd practiced in the mirror, that the sun rises whether we think we deserve it or not. Forgiveness is the same. Not a grand declaration, but a daily decision. Then came the question everyone had been waiting for. "Margaret, what was it like watching your daughter tell this story, knowing you were part of the pain she had to overcome?" My mother paused. The cameras hummed softly. Then, in a voice that cracked once but held steady, she said it felt like staring into a mirror she'd avoided her entire life. She said she believed control would keep me safe, that shame would shield me from judgment. But love doesn't build walls. It builds bridges. And she was grateful I had built one back to her. I took her hand, still cold, still trembling, and felt the final sharp edge inside me soften. Not into forgetting, but into something stronger. As the audience stood, I understood the sweetest victory I would ever know. Not winning against her, but winning against the story that tried to shrink us both. The outcast hadn't just found a seat at a table. She had crafted the table herself, set an extra place, and kept the door open. When the lights dimmed and the choir began again, I could almost hear my grandmother's faded handwriting weaving through the music. "If life says there's no seat for you, build your own. Invite kindness. Leave a chair empty. Someone will come." There we stood, mother and daughter. Imperfect, unfinished, but walking the bridge together toward morning. The room fell silent. Even the crew wiped their eyes. For the first time in years, I reached for my mother's hand, not because she was my mother, but because she was a woman brave enough to speak the truth. When the segment ended, applause thundered. But what stayed with me was her quiet exhale, the sound of someone realizing she no longer had to hide. That Christmas, I stepped through her front door for the first time since the night she told me I was banned. The house looked unchanged, the wreath, the table, the polished silver napkin rings. But the air felt lighter, as if every window had been opened and something old had finally drifted away. An empty chair sat beside mine. "For your grandmother," Mom said gently, "and for forgiveness." We gathered, Mom, Dad, Daisy, even neighbors who came to witness what some had already dubbed the miracle dinner. When Mom stood, her voice trembled. "I once told my daughter she was banned from Christmas. I thought I was protecting our image. But reputation is a poor substitute for love. I hurt her. I hurt all of us. I'm sorry." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was sacred. Dad reached across the table. "We should have spoken sooner," he said. "Nora, you ended the cycle." I squeezed their hands. "We can't rewrite the past," I whispered. "But we can choose what happens next." Daisy lifted her glass. "To second chances. And to cinnamon star bread." Laughter rippled, warm and alive. Clara wandered around stealing pie and hearts alike. When she handed my mother a cookie, Mom's hands trembled as she whispered, "Thank you for bringing her home." I smiled. She brought me home. Later, after the house quieted, I stood in the kitchen. The old recipe box rested on the counter, lid slightly open. I brushed my fingers over it. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered. The table's full again. For the first time, Christmas didn't feel staged. It felt earned. The next morning, Clara's laughter echoed through the house as light spilled in like forgiveness itself. Mom sat beside her flipping through photo albums. She looked up. "She has your eyes." "Maybe she has yours too," I said. And just like that, the bridge held. Before I left, Mom pressed an envelope into my palm. "For when you're ready." On the flight home, I opened it. Inside was a generous check and a note for your foundation. So no woman ever has to choose shame over love again. She had been listening. That's how the Second Sunrise Fund began, a small charity that grew into a network supporting single mothers through the holidays. Each December, we sent boxes stamped with the promise, "No one is banned from Christmas." The bakery flourished, too, a refuge of flour, laughter, and grace. Customers pinned notes to the walls with stories of second chances and quiet new beginnings. Every Christmas Eve, I'd bake one loaf of cinnamon star bread, leave a chair empty, and repeat the words that changed my life. If life says there's no place for you at the table, build your own. One afternoon, a woman about my mother's age walked into the bakery clutching my book like it might fall apart. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in years," she said. "I saw you and your mom on TV. You gave me the courage to call her." We embraced, two strangers stitched together by regret and hope. After she left, I cried in the back room, realizing my story had become someone else's path home. Mom kept her promise. We spoke often but gently. Some love needs space to grow strong. Every Christmas we gathered, not to fix what had been broken, but to honor that we survived it. Clara adored her grandmother. She learned to roll pie crust on her lap and listen to stories that once would have stung but now simply made us smile. Progress, I realized, is when you can tell your past without reopening the wound. Daisy joined the bakery, managing the charity, while I baked and wrote. We joked that we'd turned family drama into a family business, except this time, it healed people. When a network asked to film a follow-up a year later, I hesitated, then agreed. On camera, I said everything had changed and nothing had. I still baked. I still mourned what might have been. But now I built from it. That's the difference between surviving and truly living. The documentary closed on our Christmas fundraiser, hundreds of women laughing, singing, eating together. In the corner, Mom held Clara, smiling like she finally understood what fearless love looks like. Letters poured in. "You made me believe in family again." That's when I understood. Healing isn't a finish line. It's a rhythm. Some days steady, some days slow, but always forward. That Christmas, the bakery glowed with cinnamon and laughter. Clara, covered in frosting, declared herself head baker. Mom, Dad, and Daisy came in dusted with snow. Mom carried a pie wrapped in foil. "Your grandmother's recipe," she said shyly. "Maybe you could add it to the menu." "Only if you bake it with me next year," I replied. She smiled.
Deal.
We gathered around the large oak table I'd built when I opened the shop, wide enough for everyone, strong enough for every story. This time, no chairs were empty. Outside, the world was white and still. Inside, warmth and carols wrapped around us like grace. Mom brushed crumbs from Clara's cheek. "I can't believe I almost missed this," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "We can't change what happened, but we can keep choosing better, one Christmas at a time." Later, after closing, I stood alone watching the tree lights flicker. Clara had hung a crooked yellow ornament shaped like a rising sun near the top. Above the register hung Grandma's note. "If life tells you there's no place for you at the table, make your own. Invite kindness. Leave one chair open. Someone will come." She was right. Someone always does. Sometimes it's a stranger. Sometimes it's a second chance. And sometimes, if you're blessed, it's the very person who once turned you away. As I locked the door and stepped into the snowy night, I glanced back at the glowing sign above the counter. Second Sunrise. Home of hope and warm bread. I smiled and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Mom. We did it." And that's how this story ends. Not with fireworks, not with grand speeches, but with peace, with laughter, with a quiet certainty that love, when given another chance, finds its way home. Never let someone else's shame decide your worth. Love speaks louder, grace stands stronger, and kindness, no matter how small, always leaves the sweetest aftertaste. If this story meant something to you, a like or a comment truly matters. It reminds me to keep telling these stories for every woman who's been cast out and still found her way home. Because sometimes the second sunrise is even more beautiful than the first.